All right, what's up, guys? I'm back in my garage. It's been a little bit since I posted a video. Today I'm working on this. It's a 2002 Sportster. It's actually really nice, but I let it sit for the last 8 months or so it's really dusty. I'm gonna clean it up. I'm gonna ride it for a little bit, post it for sale, and hopefully sell it pretty soon. But it ran really good about 8 months ago, and then like I said, I let it sit. Probably shouldn't have done that, but I'm pretty sure the carb just needs cleaned because I got it to fire up by adjusting the choke, but once it warms up, it starts to bog a little bit when I'm riding it, and then when I close the choke all the way, once it's warmed up, it dies. It doesn't die all the time, but it dies sometimes. Anyways, today I'm pulling the carb off this. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do is pull off this air cleaner. I'm gonna take everything off with an impact, but I'm gonna put it all in. Put everything back together with a ratchet or just manual tools. So I actually really like this bike, but I don't really ride it that much, so I think I'm gonna end up selling it. I'm also gonna do a video on cleaning this thing up. Oh, I bet. See if there's one underneath here. I guess there is. So the air filter box is 9/16, but is like overly tight. I don't know who the hell put this on. That is way too fucking tight. If I had to use a breaker bar on it. God damn. And put pressure like that just to get it off. But I'm gonna go back and check the torque on all these before I reinstall everything, but to me, that's way too fucking tight. Okay, so the next thing I'm gonna do is loosen this choke, which I think I just tightened it. The next thing we're gonna do is tilt this carburetor forward. And there's actually a boot back here. I'm not sure if you can see it. Right there where that crack is. This right here is just a vacuum line, by the way. What I just moved is just a vacuum line. So that boot actually goes over the intake right there. So we're just gonna tilt that forward. Okay, so the next thing, there's 4 screws on the bottom that you wanna be very, very careful with. Because they strip very easily. These are very fucking tight. There's one that's loose. And if I'm ever worried about stripping screws, I typically just put a vise on the head and turn it slowly. And that'll typically break it loose, especially on some of these. By the way, when you start pulling this off, gas is gonna start leaking. So I recommend getting a pan. Okay. So we're gonna get a pan right now. You can see gas is leaking. That's just all the fuel that's in the carb. So this carb is not super dirty. It's not super clean either. So the float looks good on this. This is the float. I'm gonna pull off the main jet and the idle jet. Main jet is an 8mm. Whoopsie. So it's a little dirty, but not too bad. I'm just gonna take a wire brush to it, clean it up a little bit. Okay, so I have these little carb cleaner. So I'm literally just gonna clean this up as good as I can. Try to get all the gunk off it. It's a little dirty, like I said, but not too bad. And then you don't want to open up these holes anymore. So I typically just stick something in there, go around a little bit, kind of spin this on there. Then reinstall it. That's your main jet, by the way. Don't over tighten this, just snug. Okay, the next thing I'm gonna take off is the idle jet. That's actually in this little hole. Make sure you're pressing firmly so you don't strip these out. You'll feel it break loose. This is the idle jet. That is a little dirty, but not too bad. Just gonna clean it with the wire brush. It's a little dirty, but that might be why it's dying after it warms up and idles for a minute. But a lot of times people take these to mechanics and they'll charge you a good amount to do this. And this is all they're doing. So I'm gonna turn one of these wires to the side and just drive it in there, kind of wiggle it around. But you don't want to make this hole any bigger. Do it to the other side, or if your wire is long enough, you only have to do it to one side. Then reinstall it. I will just set it in there. Then you use a screwdriver to put it in place. Make sure it's square in there. I'll turn it till it clicks the wrong way. You'll feel it click. Just put it into place. And then snug it tight. Okay, so here's the bowl for the carburetor. Focus in on it a little bit. I'm just gonna wipe this as clean as I can. Clean everything off as good as I can. I leave the gasket in there so I don't have to buy a new one. There's this little bracket on the side. Can you see that? Yeah, there's a little bracket on the side. It hangs from right here. That's your accelerator bracket linkage. You want to put that into your accelerator pump. Be careful not to rip that boot. Should slide in fairly easily. Make sure everything else is lined up. Slide it back into place. And then put your 4 screws back in the bottom. And you could just hand thread these. There's 4 screws in each corner. I don't know if you remember, or 1 in each corner of the bowl. And I'm not showing this on camera, but every time I use one of these tools, I'm just wiping it off. Make sure it doesn't get dirty, anything dirty on the car. So I'm literally just gonna snug this like this real tight. As tight as I can on all 4, and then I'll go back and snug them all. And there's a blue gasket inside here that I didn't show. You can actually see it in the video. But you wanna make sure that's not torn or damaged at all, or else you will leak fuel. You'll be pulling this bowl off, but make sure you put a good amount of pressure on this. And then snug. I go through all 4 of them a couple times, probably 3 times actually, because you can feel it turn just a tiny bit. Just make sure you're not stripping those screws. If you do strip them, just replace them. So those all feel fairly snug. The only thing left to do is remove the top and do the slide. There's a bolt on the left side by the cable, or a screw. You're gonna break that loose. Pull that out. That's this one. And then there's 4 bolts on top, or 4 screws on top. This one's pretty long. I think it's because it holds that bracket on. And this top's gonna come off. Ugh. And it is spring loaded, so be careful. So that's your spring, that's your top, that's your spring. The slide is in there. So here you're gonna pop this out. This kind of a little rubber boot you want to be pretty careful with, not to rip it. Star bit, your needle. I forgot what the star thing's called. I'll tell you right now. I'll look it up. But again, be careful with this rubber. Yeah, this rubber boot. You don't want to tear that. Something else to note. I'm not sure all motorcycles have this, but there is. I don't know if you can see it in there. Yeah, there's a little washer right there on the top. Let's see if I can move it. I don't really want to move it. It's actually that right there. Okay, you see it move? But you want to make sure that's in place also. So I'm going to clean the float needle first. I'm just going to use steel wool. And that thing's pretty dirty. That also might be one of the issues while it's dying. Next, you're going to clean this. It's pretty dusty, pretty dirty. That's actually really dirty. But you just want to clean that up as good as possible, just with the clean towel. I don't use carburetor cleaner, and I was told not to use carburetor cleaner, especially on that rubber boot. You see it's pretty dirty. We're just going to clean that up as good as we can. Then we're going to take 4-0 steel wool to it. Clean it up as good as we can. Grab some steel wool and just go at it a little bit. Just clean it up as good as you can. And then wipe it down again when you're done. Just want to get all that gunk off it. Off of everything that's sliding up and down. You can see it's coming really clean. So make sure you clean the bottom. As you can see, that's pretty dirty, pretty black. You take that 4-0 steel wool to it. Comes pretty clean. And wipe it down with a clean towel again. Again, be very careful with that rubber boot. You don't want to rip that. Just remember, the cleaner it is, the better this thing slides up and down, the smoother it's gonna ride. Next thing you're gonna do is clean where the slide actually goes. That's where a lot of your friction's gonna come from. You will be using some carburetor cleaner pretty soon on this. No steel wool, just the carburetor. And there are little slots on the inside that you want to clean too. A lot of people use a little brush for this. I didn't have a brush, so I'm just using a towel, which will still work. Okay, next thing we're gonna do is take some carb cleaner in here. Don't overdo it. Clean up in here too. Don't need to overdo it. I might have overdid it a little bit, but it'll be all right. And then just wipe it out. Again, if I had a little brush right now, I'd be wiping it all down with the little brush instead of just a towel, but a towel will work. Oh yeah. Look at that. Thing is really clean. You guys seen this little star piece? I forgot what it's called, but I don't ever do anything with that. I literally just wipe it down and I blow it off and then reinstall it. I couldn't get that washer. That washer fell off, so I just put it on the end of this and then drop it back in the hole. There's a little hole, and just drop it in and then reinstall it. So these little flange bits right here, these go down. It should just sit on top of there. That's what it's gonna look like before you reinstall it. You put the spring back in there and then reinstall it, just slide it back in. Oh yeah, there is a little dot on this that goes facing you. Almost forgot to mention that. You put that little spring in and then make sure this gasket is seated in that little ring. If you pinch that gasket, or if it's not seated correctly, you're gonna have issues. So make sure you do that correctly. And be really careful with that gasket. Something else I didn't mention, that needle right there needs to slide into the jet. The thing I'm gonna do is just wipe this out. I don't ever really do anything with that. Just blow it out and just wipe it clean. Again, all these little things that you do are gonna make a huge difference. Next thing you're gonna do is start reinstalling everything. There's this little brass piece that slides over the top right here. It's fairly important, I would say. But you gotta make sure that slides in, up, over. This throttle cable is probably gonna be a bit of a pain to deal with. Unless I can get it to slide in and make sure that's seated in there. That is seated. I'm gonna hand thread all the screws. The long one goes in the corner, and that's where that bracket connects to. A lot more issues if you cross thread something, I'll tell you that much. Next, I'm gonna make sure all my cables are installed. And once you get a few turns in on it, you can use a screwdriver to finish tightening them up. It'll go a lot faster. I just snug them really lightly all the way around the first time. Make sure you don't pinch any of your cables. This first one, I tighten a little snug. Next one, tighten a little snug. This one, tighten a little snug. A little snug. Then I'm gonna go ahead and install this one. This cable. Or this bracket. And make sure you hand start everything. Because if you damage any of these threads, you're gonna have a lot more issues. This one, I just give it a little snug, and then I back this one out so I can tighten this one a little more snug. That one's plenty snug. And I go back, snug that one, snug it all the way around a couple more times. Okay, now that I got all this tightened, there is a little gasket in there. Let's see. This little gasket, it's gonna go over the intake. You're gonna snug that on there first before you put the carb back on there. So mine, and it actually goes on a little grooved area. So mine's seated fairly well right now. Next, you're gonna slide the carb back into place. You'll actually feel this go in. And then once you have that in place, you should be able to let it go and it'll just sit. Next thing you're gonna do is go back to the other side and reinstall your choke. And just snug that into place. Be careful with this because it will break. You want to double check and make sure your vacuum is still installed. Mine's on there good, so I never took it off. We're good on the vacuum. Okay, the next thing we're gonna do is just give it a test fire, just make sure we're running good. On. Open the choke. Fire right up. Turn the key back off. And we're golden, baby. I think fired right up after not running for 8 months. And with all that vibration, you want to make sure this thing's seated still very, very well. Next, you're going to reinstall your box. This is your box. As you can see, it's pretty dusty. I'm just going to take compressed air and blow it out. Maybe just wipe it down. It's not going to do anything. Actually, I'm just going to wipe the... You know what? Right now that I have it all taken apart, I'm going to go ahead and just wipe it all down. Next, I'm going to reinstall the box. Make sure your gaskets are in place. Make sure your holes line up. And then I'm just going to start the threads. And then if you have any kind of play in here, you want to make sure that's fully seated. Go ahead and start these also. And check your torque specs on those. Like I said, I'm just gonna get them started, just so I know what I'm snugging them up against. And a lot of this will all tighten up once it all starts going back together. So you'll see all the gaps fill in. I'm gonna go back and re-torque these. Next, reinstall your breather. And you'll see like these holes are different than the ones down here, so just make sure those line back up. I cleaned mine with compressed air, kind of press it on there. It should hold it in place, but if it doesn't, hold it with your finger. I always just hold it just in case. And then reinstall your 4 bolts. But while you have it all apart, just go ahead and clean everything up. So whether you're keeping it or you're selling it, next person has a nice bike. Thing you're gonna do is install your cover. Put everything back together. You should be back in business. Those feel good. That's all it takes to clean your carb. All right, guys, so I just got done cleaning this carb. This thing sat for about 8 months, and now it's firing first shot. As always, I'll link everything in the description. Carb Cleaner, 0.40 or 40 steel wool, the whole 9 yards. I think that's it. Microfiber cloths, a little brush. As always, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. I work on a ton of stuff. Make sure you take this thing for a ride. Enjoy it. I'm out.